Since our world is shifting, we recognize we needed to shift our approach to stay connected with you. For those of you who are new, welcome.
We have come a long way in terms of improving diversity in our industry, but just because we've traveled a little bit further than where we were does not mean that we are anywhere close to equality or anywhere close to having an industry that reflects the talents, the ideas, the creativity of a broad spectrum of our population.
Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. And who doesn't like to dance? I know I do.
We appreciate the entire community for coming, joining us. So thanks so much, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah McComb. I'm the co-founder and president of the Women's Tech Forum. Welcome to our third quarter 2021 Masterclass, Inspiring Women in a Changed Working World. We are beyond excited for this upcoming class and the amazing women who will be on the panel today. This is the first Masterclass being presented by our newly formed WTF EMEA chapter. It's been a dream of ours to start expanding WTF regionally throughout the world, so it's very exciting to see these first steps be taken. And don't worry, APAC, we do have our sights set on a chapter for you as well. It's vitally important to us that the WTF mission of empowering and advancing women in the cloud, telecom, and data center spaces gets a more local presence whenever possible. So thank you all so much for joining us today. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Sue Jones to introduce the WTF EMEA team. Sue, take it away.
Thank you, Sarah, and hello everyone, and welcome to our inaugural EMEA Women's Tech Forum Masterclass. And while we're now keen to start to increase our membership, it's very important to make it clear for us that everyone is welcome. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, please do join us. On the screen in a moment, you'll see the founding members of the EMEA chapter. And if you'd like to get involved with us, then please do get in touch with any one of the 6 people on this screen. We'd love you to be part of our team. Our intention is to develop an ongoing programme across EMEA, one that complements the wider group that Sarah just talked about. And eventually we'd love to have face-to-face networking events, hopefully leveraging in-region conferences and activities. And who knows, hopefully one day that could happen in the not too distant future. During today's panel, there will be a couple of polls that we want to encourage you to participate in. And Val, our moderator, will signal when these are happening so you can play your part. And we also encourage you to submit your questions to our panel via the Q&A function you can see on the right of your screen, as there will be some time later on to address these. So finally, please do pass our information onto your own networks. URL for the website is also on the screen. You'll find updates and information about latest events and activities. So without further ado, I'm delighted to hand you over to our moderator for Inspiring Women in a Changed Working World, Val Walsh, over to you.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, Val.
Sorry about that. Unfortunately, as these things always happen, I have an electric charger man behind me trying to install an electric charger 2 hours late. So it didn't align perfectly with my presentation, so apologies for that. So first of all, I just want to say before we start, huge shout out to the WTF team. I've known many of the ladies involved for a long time, and I was a little involved in my previous role, but I just want to thank them for pulling this together, especially in this time. I think we don't have any time to really do these things, and we can't see each other. I mean, I recall having a champagne glass in my last WTF event, so it's not as exciting today, unfortunately, but this is all extracurricular activity for everybody, and I don't know what your guys' jobs are like, but if they're anything like mine, it's really hard to find the time, and so I just really appreciate the effort from all the WTF. So thank you, ladies. So over to the reason we're here today, which is we're here to talk about inspiring women in the changing working world. So we are talking to some very inspiring women And we're also hoping that these women will inspire you guys. And we are taking questions, so there will be a Q&A section. So please put your questions in. If we see questions there that we can answer instead of some of the questions we've prepped, we'd be happy to do so, assuming we're able to answer the questions, but we'll do our very best. So, I mean, as we talk through this, we are going to be thinking through, you know, some of the changes. I mean, obviously the COVID pandemic has had enormous amount of change in our lives. Anything from, you know, like I haven't put on high heels in 2 years, you know, so there's lots of little things. Also, you know, are you used to talking? I love talking to people, so I'm now talking to my laptop as I am right now, have been doing that for 18 months. So, you know, how that changing world is affecting your day job, how it's affecting your life, you know, how long are you stuck in a room? And also then, you know, we've had bigger and serious initiatives that have changed the world, like the Me Too and Black Lives Matter. So really, we're going to touch on all of these things with the panel. So with that, I will introduce our 3 very kind guests for giving us the time to do this. So I'll give each of the speakers a chance just to let you know about themselves in a little bit. So I'm just going to introduce them with a few fun facts. So first of all, we'll start with Judith. So Judith is born and reared in Ireland, very like myself, and Susie, who you heard at the beginning. Actually lives in Amsterdam, has been living in Amsterdam for a long time. She has two children, and she loves to cycle, which is a prerequisite for anyone that hasn't been to Amsterdam will not know, but it's very important that you have a bike in Amsterdam, and they rule the roads. Loves Pilates and also loves doing renovations. So in her spare time, she appears to be renovating quite a lot, which is, I'm amazed she finds any time to do that. But one of the things she did focus on, and hopefully we'll talk about, is, you know, how we cope with the delights of work-life balance. Over to Uche. So Uche is a Nigerian American. Born in New Jersey, has been living on the continent now for 20 years and absolutely loves it. And she has 1 dog, and the dog is, I'm going to butcher the name now because I'm Irish and it looks like Bessie, Count Bessie. I'm sure that's wrong, but she can correct me in a moment. And then finally we have Nikki. Nikki has a 17-year-old daughter, is Nigerian, but born in the UK, lives in a little tiny town in Oxfordshire, but loves Africa and has had most amazing career, having had the pleasure of traveling around the entire continent. So very lucky lady. So with that, I'm going to allow each of them to introduce themselves, tell you all a little bit about their journey, about the roles they have today, and also how they got there, and any advice they would have, or guidance that they might be able to give us on how we've been coping with this changing world that is the pandemic. So I see the lovely Judith up first on my screen. So we'll start with you, if that's okay.
Yeah, hi Val. Very excited to be with you all today, especially on this panel. So a quick bit on me. I started my career wanting to be an accountant, and I went straight from school into a pure accountancy program with Deloitte. And when I finished my training, I joined a tech startup, and I've been in the tech industry ever since. Early on, I consciously moved out of finance into sales operations, and then I went into a broader chief of staff role, and now I'm the VP of the Growth and Emerging Markets at Equinix, which involves being responsible for 12 of our markets in EMEA. Over to Nikki.
You're on mute, Nikki, sorry.
Apologies, the numbers are... I've heard that you're on mute so many times. Apologies all. I'll start again. I'm Nikki Popoola, for those of you that are Nigerian or have any links to Nigeria. I just try... Anyway, I work for WIOCC as sales director for West Africa. I've been in the telecoms industry for over 20 years. Prior to telecoms, I was in the FMCG market in sales. I've sold drinks, I've sold, I was going to say drugs, but not that kind of drugs as in, you know, drugs and all sorts of things in advertising. And I was fortunate enough that a good friend of mine gave my CV to someone in cable and wireless, and he said, "Can you sell?" I said, "Hell yes," and here I am today. And from the start of my career, I've been focused on Africa, and it's great to see the changes that have occurred in Africa. I remember then initially selling services via satellite at exorbitant fees, and I remember the first cables going in. So yeah, I remember the phones as well, when there were no mobile phones and hardly any lines. So it's good to see the development, and I'm glad to play a key part with WIOCC in the development of telecoms across Africa. Over to
Uche.
Thank you. Over to Uche.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Uche Ofodile. I'm CEO for MTN in Benin. And the MTN Group is the largest telecommunications provider in Africa. And so I manage one of their operations in the country called Benin. I'm currently in Cotonou, so hello from Cotonou. How did I get into my role? Well, I started in telecommunications, similar to Nikki, just over 20 years ago, around the time that telecommunications was privatized in Nigeria. And I started in marketing, so had no intention of ever becoming a CEO. It was not on my radar. I was sort of in public relations and then went into marketing. And I would say probably about 10 years after doing a bunch of roles in marketing, I had an executive coach who asked me if I had ever thought about becoming a CEO. And the minute she sort of put that idea in my head, I kind of became obsessed with it, and went on to run an operations in DRC, Liberia, and now Benin. So this is my third CEO role. And as I said, as was mentioned earlier, I absolutely love working on the continent because I just love to see the impact that one has immediately. And so that's the rush I get from working on the continent, and really great to be here and to meet everyone.
Thank you, ladies. That's really cool. So before we go into the first question, and in the spirit of us being at the WTF event, can one of you give me a WTF moment from your career? A positive or a negative, whichever you prefer. And whoever wants to speak can put their hand up so I don't have to pick. But I will pick. Anyone? Nikki, you're on mute.
again, I picked Judith.
Oh, you picked me. Okay. I guess I'll go for one of the proud moments rather than the real WT whatever. So I suppose about 3 or 4 years ago, I was at our Equinix President's Club, and I had been there kind of, I like being in the background. I don't tend to like to have a forefront role. So I'm always in these management roles. I'm not in a sales role. And every year at these President's Clubs, we have the CEO Award. And I sat at the back and I thought, okay, look, this will be interesting to see who it is this year. And as Charles Myers, our CEO, started describing the person, I started going, oh gosh, this is me. So he started with, she's very direct. Sometimes, she can be too direct, but at least you always get the real story from Judith. She loves a challenge. She takes on whatever she's given. And yeah, with that, I didn't hear any more because I was just going through the, oh no moment. And so he announced my name. I walked up, and I used to, and probably still do to a certain degree, suffer from massive imposter syndrome. So as I looked out over the crowd, I just thought, oh gosh, if they really catch me this time, there's going to be trouble. So that was my WTF moment. I'm very proud, but also one of those, hell, I wish it wasn't me.
Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. And well done. Well done on the award. That is awesome.
First woman at Equinix to get the CEO award, so I was very proud.
Wow, that is amazing. Well done. So with that, and it comes into kind of the next thing we want to talk about, which is confidence and courage. And Lots of people will come up to you, particularly as you get on in your career, and they'll say, how do you do that? Like, how do you have the confidence to, and I'm not going to ask you, Judith, because you mentioned about being direct, which is quite an Irish thing. I'm also very direct. And so sometimes we answer the question and we don't appreciate who's in the room. So people say, how do you have confidence? And I'm like, I didn't know. I didn't even know I was confident there. I didn't even see that person in this room. I was just answering the question. But maybe, Nikki, if you could just give us a little bit of advice on, how do you be the brave person to do the something, whether you're worried about it or not?
To be honest, I believe I'm always worried about things. There's always nerves behind it, but I'm never scared of putting myself forward. Sometimes I don't think. I say things. I always say what I see, so I'm not scared about calling things out that I think are wrong, even if it's going to put me into trouble. I think it's also a very Nigerian thing to be quite outspoken and quite direct. And if I see something wrong, I say, nope, that's not the way it should be done. I remember, I won't say which organization, some years back, I worked in an organization where it was quite hierarchical. And I remember being in a meeting and there were 40 of us. And other than the senior guy's PA, I was the only other female. And not just female, of course, the only black woman. And I questioned a few things, and afterwards someone called me to one side and said, oh, you might want to tone things down a bit. These guys aren't used to dealing with women, and that's not the right thing. And I just don't agree with that. I speak out, even if it's when it's going to get me into trouble. If I see an injustice, I will speak out. I think we all should.
I think that's very important. And have you seen any change? Has anything? Are you starting to see any improvement after the Me Too and the Black Lives Matter? Is there anything more positive coming out of any of your organizations? I mean, Uche, you may have some examples. Being the CEO, you may have a little more clout in your organization, hopefully.
Yeah, I definitely think both the Black Lives Matter movement and Me Too movements have shaped the way that organizations are behaving now. I'll speak about MTN Benin. I mean, obviously, as a woman CEO, you're a bit more sensitive to some of these things naturally, I think. But I think that it allowed us to have a much wider conversation within our organization. One of the things that we did during the Me Too specifically was just have a much more open and transparent conversation around sexual harassment in the workplace, and using that as an opportunity to, one, re-educate people on what that meant. And I'll give you an example. In the organization at the time, we had women in the organization who weren't really clear how sexual harassment could be defined, right? And we had policies. It wasn't that we didn't have policies in place, but the idea of someone speaking to you inappropriately versus someone touching you, for a lot of women in my organization at the time, they felt like the line was only crossed if someone actually physically touched you, as opposed to how an individual made you feel in the organization. And the same education had to be done for the men. So it was really a really good opportunity for us to sort of step back for a minute to say, do people have an understanding of what that means? And, do they have an understanding of the policy and the fact that we can protect them if they're having issues? And I think that was really good for the women because they felt much safer in the organization. And there was a reset for the organization as a whole. So I think there's been a lot of sensitivity. And I just want to add one more thing, though. Outside of Me Too and Black Lives Matter, COVID has also really changed the way that we work as well. And it's really given us an opportunity, not just for MTN Benin, but MTN as a group, to say, we actually are now more aware of some of the challenges that our employees have at home. For instance, we all take for granted that, when you go home, your electricity is working and, people can work from home. But actually, when we had to suddenly start working from home, it wasn't just about the digital transformation that we had to go through, but also how do we support our employees from working from home in areas where they have complications like electricity and all that. And so it just made us a lot more sensitive to the needs of our employees as well. And that there's been a big shift in terms of empathy, I think, from an organizational point of view, which perhaps in the past was not necessarily there.
Yeah, I think that's I think that had been a problem in a lot of rural areas and things where people, or even, I mean, Wi-Fi not working, or people not having headsets, so like screaming at a laptop, and then there's 5 children or whatever. Yeah, it's been a huge challenge. And with that, we are going into we are going into a poll here now, and as part of this poll, we want each of you to write one word in the chat, just one single word about your COVID that describes your COVID experience. So if you could all just go and do that now, and we will come back to that in a few minutes. So next question that we're going to touch on is, I think we're just going to stick with the COVID theme just for a few minutes. I think a lot of companies have dealt with it, and I think it was this kind of panic dealing with it. Okay, everyone can work from home, and now suddenly everything crossed, we're coming out of the other end, and how have you managed all the way through the process? And are you worried about the management of coming back in? And some of the things we've been thinking about were in my organization is, doing in the women's group is around things like, do we have some facilitators about, coming back to work and, office attire and coming back, having to, get dressed again and put on suits, and do we have to wear suits now? And if we're only in the office 25%, which day do we need to go? And so it's kind of even, and lots of people have changed their body shape in the year because they've been at home. So some people are exercising morning, noon, and night, so they're half the size, and some people are, eating all the time or whatever. But there's various different things, and people are, I'm sure there's lots of people worried about going back to the office for even those reasons, and obviously there's more serious reasons about trying to get your kids back into a different routine. I mean, I was traveled every single week before COVID, and now I haven't traveled, and so they're like, well, why would you need to go to London in October? And you're like, but I used to always go to London, and now it's this kind of, so the whole family dynamic has to shift a whole gear again. So what are your what are your views, and how have you been coping? Will we start with Judith?
Sure. From a personal level, I guess I took COVID to learn how to create more time for myself, which I hadn't really done before. It was either work or kids, or work or kids. And so I really learned to embrace that and accept my introverted self and be okay with it, because I think for a long time, I used to consider being the quiet one in the group as a negative, but I don't so much anymore. I really got into cooking, and it wasn't all positive. I missed being able to physically with my family and friends. My mom lives on her own, so that was hard. Homeschooling was, that was the craziest challenge. That is not something I'm, cut out for. That level of juggling was just beyond possible. Work-wise, it was quite interesting because I had been in my role probably about 5 months, and it was a new role. And one of the key objectives was to bring 11 senior leaders that are dispersed across EMEA together as a team. And similar to you, Val, I was on a plane every second week. I was hitting 2 to 3 countries, and that's what I was doing as I was kind of ramping into my role. So when COVID hit and there was no more travel, I was really concerned about how I was going to do this via Zoom. And to be honest, I really questioned my abilities as a leader to be effective. But actually, the team evolved naturally through having everyone on Zoom calls almost every day and sharing what was going on and sharing experiences and sharing all the challenges and offering to help with each other on those challenges. And I don't think that would have happened so organically without the enforced circumstances that we had. So before that, of course, we relied on the face-to-face. So going back, I'm also hoping we won't have to travel as much, but it's already starting to creep in. You know, we've a 3-day offsite coming up in Paris in October, and then it's like, well, if you can go there, you can go here, there, and everywhere. But we'll see. But to your point about coming back to the office, this is my 3rd day coming to the office. It feels weirdly amazing. I actually forgot how my bubble, even though I thought I was talking to everybody at Equinix, I was only talking to the people I need. So I come in and I start seeing people here, and it's really great. But yeah, the extroverts want to come back. The introverts are quite happy staying at home. So we're actually thinking about having designated days that you have to come back, because one of the biggest concerns is our culture and how important that is and how we keep that. Because as soon as you start having that, going back to some people on Zoom, some people in person, you're essentially going to lose it. But on the dress code, not so sure. I'm with you. No heels, comfortable clothes, no suits. It's been quite a ride for the last 18 months.
Yeah. And I guess the other part of it is like you say, the introverts want to stay home. There are also people that will feel isolated, or they'll feel, probably they have been lonely potentially through the whole of COVID. Mm-hmm. I mean, how do you as a leader support those people, or how do you make sure that they're being recognized, and that, almost trying to encourage them back into the office, or not? But how do you manage that type of scenario?
Yeah. So, in the beginning, we thought we would just let people do what suited them, but it's not as easy as that. And we are going to have to, and not all offices are open. Even coming to this office, I had to book a desk and had to be booked within a certain time. And, you have to make sure that there's only an X number of people coming in. And that's just in Amsterdam. It varies depending on the government rules. But in general, most people want to come back. Yeah, for the people that don't, that's going to be hard, because we are going to be asking people to come back into the office. We've gone from having designated offices, though, per person, to just having hot desks in most of our offices, which is going to be a massive change culturally as well. And for some of our offices, we're actually having to introduce that concept. And my first reaction was, well, that'll probably make those that don't want to come back not want to come back, when they have to have a locker and they have to make sure that their desk is clean at the end of every day. So there's a bit of a change management exercise going on, I suppose, and it varies definitely by country. But yeah, we're very much out to support as many as possible. But to your point, the people that have been begging to come back are those that either live on their own, the extroverts, the people that love the social life at work, people that live in small spaces, people with young kids. They're all here. So as soon as the gates were open, they ran in.
It's like going back to school. And Uche, have you made any policy changes, or do you have any guidance as to how you've been managing it?
So it's a really interesting question. 2 months ago, I was on this kick of getting everyone back into the office. And then we had a spike. And I think one of the things that COVID is teaching us, certainly for my organization, is the need to just be very flexible. I don't think that, in my view, I think that it's going to be very difficult to have a hardcore policy around this, just because of the lack of predictability around the disease, right? So we have been really flexible. And because we also know that people are spending so much time online, we've put things in place like no meeting Wednesdays, for instance, just so that people are off Teams or Zoom or whatever, just so that they have a day to themselves and not, constantly talking to people all day. We also are saying to people that, every Friday is a half day, so they have free time to do their own thing. As well, so we're trying to put in, we're trying to sort of be a lot more flexible around the policy. Whereas, last year, we wanted you in at 8 and you had to leave no later, you couldn't leave before 5. There was a lot of rigidity in terms of how we operated, and this has forced us to go in a completely different direction. We're also, part of what we do every month is we have something called the CEO update, where we just sort of give people across the business an update on how the business is doing, but we add to that some things around wellness and mental health, because we know that people are, sort of reacting to this sort of long stay at home in different ways, just to give support to our employees. And again, it's an evolving policy for us, because the longer we live with this, the more changes that we're going to have to make. And I don't think that the thing for me and what I say to my team is that I don't want to have like hard set rules. We just have to kind of roll as things move. We have to be adaptable to ensure the comfort of our employees.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's probably the hottest topic I work in Microsoft. I think it's probably the hottest topic, the hybrid workplace. And everybody has an opinion. Yeah, it's going to be, I think the positive side of it is it will be fluid. I think there's a lot more openness to talk about everything rather than making decisions as to how things have to be. But at the same time, I think nobody should underestimate the value of going for the cup of coffee, or going for the quick drink after work, or grabbing some lunch with someone. I think it's huge, and it is. I joined Microsoft on March 9th, and COVID hit on March 20th. So I've been a COVID baby, as I say, in the company, and it's been very challenging developing all the relationships, hiring all of the new team on my little laptop. So I'm going insane talking to this little machine in front of me. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting in the office. Let's just have a quick look at the poll. I don't know who is Demi, are you looking at the poll results, or can we get a few words?
Just me looking at that, if I could just come in with a few words. I want to come in from a slightly different angle. All three of you work from an office normally, but I've worked from home for the last 15 years. There's been a lot of talk about there being no culture in an organization if you work from different locations. And I actually would like to disagree, especially with WIOCC. We're a small organization spread mainly across Africa. And there were a group of us here in the UK, and all of us from the UK work from home. But even with the wider team, we all still have a close relationship. And I would say that even happened in my previous organization, Carter, where my boss was in South Africa, just like my present boss who is in South Africa. And we still formed this team relationship. Yes, we only met probably once a quarter at conferences, or would make a concerted effort to be somewhere together, but we still had that team spirit. In WIOCC, we actually refer to ourselves as the WIOCC family, and it's not just, I actually feel like we're a family, maybe because we're a smaller organization in comparison to your organizations, but it really does work. And if I'd been, a lot of people say, people working from home are shirking and whatever. If I'd been shirking from home, I don't think I'd be where I am today, whatever. And you can still, I don't know, they're just different ways. It's just a different way of working. And for a lot of people, it is helpful. I go back to years ago when my daughter was younger. I remember then I laid it out clear. It's like, right, I need to take my daughter to school. I need to pick her up from school. So it's like, please no calls before 9 o'clock and whatever. And at this time, I'll be leaving to pick her up. But I make up for that time. It's not like, I'm not saying, right, I have a set number. I work whatever time the hours required, but it's just not cast in stone. I think flexibility is key in what is right for each individual person. And again, I don't know about you, with this work, everyone working from home, I've got to know a lot more about people I'm working with and customers as well on a personal level. Everyone's been more concerned. I think it was, which I can't remember, someone mentioned empathy. You ask people more, how are you? And you actually mean it, not just how are you coping? And just talking to people about other things other than work. And I know it's an adjustment for people, but for me, it certainly worked working from home. But I guess the difference is I travel quite a bit like yourselves. I've started traveling again. I was away in April, I was away in June, and I'm off again on Monday morning. So yeah, I guess the traveling sort of makes, so that's a time I get to see people. So I'm not completely isolated. So yeah, but working from home has certainly worked for me. And I would say within our organization as well, we have the regular meetings, we have the updates about what's happening in each country, where people are and things are modified. Like right now, South Africa's been badly hit. So I don't think anyone's going into the office at the moment there. And in Kenya, it's to a limited extent. They're going in, it's on a rota basis. So that, yes, I think we've seen as a company that it does work. And going forward, I think people will have that flexibility, maybe not 100% of the time, but to choose what works best for them on a personal level as well as for the company. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to start becoming the norm. I mean, for me, when I think working from home, I think I'm actually in this room, as you know, so I'm not traveling. So it's kind of not just because my husband works here as well. He works from home like you permanently, but he like you, he would travel and now it's just this complete lockdown. So he has a much more isolated job than he would have had previously.
Yeah.
Whereas I mean, I'm still talking to people, albeit on Teams. You still see faces, you still interact quite regularly. So yeah, but I think the big thing, the big post-COVID thing, hopefully will be more flexibility and more understanding of people's needs. You know, you don't have to be in the office at 9, like you say, if you have children and you want to bring. And I think the people will be a lot more fussy about it. I think quite honestly, they'll be saying, no, I am bringing my kids to school in the morning. It won't be a, you know, try to panic and manage everything. I think people will be a lot more demanding of what they need to do on the basis that they're doing a call at 7 p.m. or whatever. You know, there'll be a quid pro quo, I think. So how are we on the COVID words?
Yeah, so some of the questions that have come through, some of our audience have also echoed that coming out of the pandemic is also just as scary as when we went in it. And what they mean by that is the uncertainty. But some of the words that have come through on the poll are anxious, intense, challenging, the flexibility, the emotional journey, exhaustion, unique, traumatizing for some people, disruptive, but also eye-opening. So a mix, and I think it probably depends on the situation people are in. But yeah, there's some of the words that have come back from our audience.
Okay, so I think we have a couple of minutes before we go to Q&A. So we'll just do a quick round. And there was one other poll that the girls wanted to cover, which was, so we'll do the poll first. And it was, I have to read this one because it's lots of words. I didn't learn it. It's a yes or no answer. Do you think #MeToo or #Black Lives Matter have pushed companies to change? And can we play a part in making change happen? So yes or no answer from the group. And meanwhile, just a quick couple of words from each of you before we go to Q&A. The question was more around, you know, and it's the age-old, you know, what would you tell your 20-year-old self? But I think if we can think of the what would you tell your 20-year-old self from in light of having been through the COVID pandemic and the Me Too and the Black Lives Matter. So, you know, I think in the last year and a half, we've had a realization that, you know, it's not the end of the world if you get a grey hair or if you're tight sladder or whatever. There's bigger stuff going on. So in light of that, your 20-year-old self, let's start with Nikki.
Be afraid. So I just have to say something personal. But a few years ago, 9 years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it was very shocking, very difficult, but I think I dealt with it well. And it sort of changed my perspective on life. So yes, COVID was scary, the unknown, but it's like you faced worse. And just always trying to look at the positives in things. There's always a positive. And it's like with COVID, the biggest positive for me on a personal level was being able to spend time with my daughter. And because she was at home, she's normally in boarding school and she was at home. And I said to her, you'll never understand what this means. I'll never get this time back again where I'm not rushing off somewhere, she's not rushing off seeing friends. We were forced to spend time together, and I enjoyed it. It was a great time. And just always try, there's always a positive, no matter, just try and focus on the positive, irrespective of the circumstances.
Yeah, I would have a similar ethos to Nikki. I also had some challenging health things. Gosh, it must be like 10 years ago now, for about 3 years. And it does change your perspective. It's kind of, it turns into a what's the worst thing that can happen? Because it did, and it wasn't that bad, you know? So I think, you know, when I described my COVID experience to this group, and then I see the poll results, I'm kind of going, yeah, I probably sound as if I just coasted through it. But I guess I just saw the positives in it. You know, I realized that there was the scary bits, but I never thought we wouldn't get through it. And I never thought that, you know, I kind of was in awe at the positives that were coming out of it, and spending time with my kids, and, you know, especially as well, it was just like this storm. You know, we had COVID, we had Black Lives Matter, we had all of that I think just kind of catapulted us into a place that we would never have got to without these two major events in the last 18 months. And at Equinix, it kind of, especially around George Floyd and also Me Too, but I guess the two of them coming together, it created a lot of the conversations that should have been had for a long time. And we kind of even more so doubled down on our networks. And we always had the Women's Leadership Network, but we have Black Connect, we have Faith Connect, we have Pride Connect. I'm sure I'm missing a few of them, but it's interesting because I did a lot of calls on this, and my daughter was overhearing a lot because I was on Zoom and I didn't have a headset, Val. But so when she came to pick her high school, which she just started in last week, we were sitting down and going through her criteria about 6 months ago. And her first one was gender balance, and her second one was diversity. And I was just like, wow. So basically, through osmosis, she just soaked in all of this stuff. So she's probably started at a school that, probably the most diverse and gender balanced in Amsterdam. And I felt very proud of that because she's 12, you know. And I kind of similar to you saying to your daughter, you'll never get this time back. I'd love to kind of fast forward 10 years and just have the conversation of what they remembered. You know, my 6-year-old and what my 12-year-old remembers. It will be so interesting.
That's really good. That is really awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And Uche?
I would tell my younger self to embrace my awkwardness or my authentic self. You know, I worried a lot when I was coming up about fitting in, you know, and I realized as I grew in my career that actually the things that I brought to the table as my authentic self are the things that actually helped me really grow very quickly or accelerate the growth in my career trajectory. And I think if I had embraced that much earlier and not worried about, you know, did I go to this school, or, am I wearing the right clothes or whatever, you know, like just embracing and being confident about who I was then and who I am today. I think my journey probably would have been a lot easier. So I mentor a lot of women, and it's something that I do say to them, especially the younger women in our organization, which is like, you don't need to hide yourself or who you are on your journey, on your career journey. It's really important to bring your full self to the table, so we know who we're dealing with, and you can shine. And it's exhausting to try to be someone else for 8 to 10 hours a day. Imagine that. So I think that's one of the things that I would have loved to have told my younger self, and I'm hoping that I'm paying that forward by having those conversations with young women today.
I think you definitely are. It's I think everybody's guilty of that a little bit, you know, trying to fit in and trying to rush to be the next thing. Yeah. Great. Thank you so much, ladies. I think we're going to go to Q&A. We've lost it. Oh, there she is on cue. There's Simi. And just Simi, just before it finishes, I haven't done the yes/no percentages on the poll, so if you want to cover that too.
Yeah, that's fine.
Perfect, thank you.
Well, thank you for a great discussion, everybody. Thanks for the questions that have come in as well. So I'll put some of them to the audience members. I don't know if we'll cover all of them, but let's get through a few of them. So maybe to Judith, one of the questions that came up was, what do you or your company do to ensure that the gender pay gap isn't an issue?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, I think there has been, well, yeah, I guess where I start really is with the benefit of having these leadership networks. I think has really spurred us to be able to have a movement and then give that movement a voice. So the Women's Leadership Network at Equinix, actually Susie, who was also a founder of this, was one of the founders of the Equinix Leadership Network, and that has really given a voice to the women at Equinix. But it's also because it has senior leaders on it, they were able to bring the concerns around pay gap or pay inequity, various other situations to the table. And I think as well now, when we go through the recruiting process, we ensure that we have a diverse panel of interviewers, both from gender, ethnicity as much as possible. And in addition to that, and the Black Lives Matter and Me Too, I think it's given us permission as leaders to be more difficult, to challenge where are you getting this pipeline of people from? It's not diverse enough. How far down are we going into looking for candidates rather than just the obvious places? And I think all of this coming together has really propelled the whole conversation around equity. So, it's not one particular thing that we're doing at Equinix. It's, the diversity, the gender balance, all of that is incredibly important from the CEO down. And we have a really great Allies Council, which started about 3 or 4 years ago. And that Allies Council also has a very strong voice back into the e-staff. So I think, when I was going for this role, I asked where my salary was compared to the male peers that I have. And even though it was an uncomfortable question, I was really happy that I asked, because it also kind of made the receiver go, oh yeah, I can share that with you actually. And that gave me confidence that there's a lot of work being done.
Great. That's great that it's starting. One of the questions actually was about, when you mentioned Ally Council, someone had actually asked what advice do you give to a group who want to be better allies? And I guess that's going to open it up to the whole panel, just to understand, when we look at the movements, how can people support more? Maybe Nikki, do you want to answer that part? Yeah.
I get one thing. We talk about diversity in organisations. It's not so. In WIOCC, we are predominantly in Africa, and we are predominantly made up of Black people. Yes, we have a mixture, but so it's not quite the same. But I guess I would like to see more women at senior levels. But considering the size we are, I think we are doing well in our organisation. But just to the wider whatever, people say, oh, let's look at what we're recruiting and whatever. Do we have a diverse enough team? I heard, and I'm sure you've all heard it, but I just love it that diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. I just love that. It's just so much that it's just not enough to say, oh yes, we have this percentage of what, this percentage. It's like, yeah, what are they actually doing within the organization? Are they in key roles? And let's try as much as possible, if each of us can push within our organizations, whether it be for women, whether it be for Black people, whether it be for any diverse groups. Let's try and push for diversity and inclusion at all levels in the organization.
Yeah, definitely. Just changing it slightly, and I guess I'll put this question to Uche. Personal branding and impact, it's something we talk about a lot and we hear about a lot. How have you created your personal brand, and how do you ensure that your impact is felt?
I think that's a really good question. Look, I had to, and it's sometimes quite a difficult exercise actually, because I think a lot of times we throw the word personal branding around quite a bit, and it's such a powerful thing if you can do it properly. But it really starts with you really knowing yourself, not what you think you are, but actually really knowing what your strengths are. What is it about you that is seen as really amazing to other people, right? And for me, I think one of the lessons I learned, I didn't realize it, but people felt, within the organization, that I was really tough and mean. And I didn't see that about myself. I thought I was, friendly. And it required me sort of looking inwards. It required me getting feedback from my colleagues, from my boss, this sort of 360 feedback to really see how people perceived me and to understand what my strengths were and the things I need to work on. And actually, that conversation, which was held with me about 10, 15 years ago, led me to get a coach, led me to sort of change a few things in terms of how I worked with my team and my colleagues, right? And so, because I wanted my brand to be authentic to me, and I wanted to be known as a tough leader in terms of performance, but empathetic when it came to people, and also to be seen as a strong communicator. And so with that feedback from people, I was able to sort of map that out. And social media has been really great in terms of helping to push that brand out there as well. If I say that I'm a strong communicator, even though I really get anxious around public speaking, I have to sort of put myself out there. And one of the ways that I've done that is to either have smaller sessions internally, or I do a lot of mentoring, as I mentioned earlier. I push a lot of that information through social media so that people have access to that information as well. Being tough in terms of performance, like for me, that's non-negotiable. I will not soften that. And my team knows that here as well. So I'm known for that. But they also know that I care, right? And that I'm empathetic about, their challenges or, their growth trajectory in the business, or that I genuinely care about their development. And as I said, I wouldn't have been able to get to that point in terms of being consistently known for those things if I hadn't done the work of really trying to understand self and getting that feedback from the people that worked closest to it.
And sorry, just to follow on from that, you said you had got a coach who had helped you through. For our younger listeners, do you think that's something they should be looking at, getting a mentor and a coach to help them decide? Not everyone wants to kind of climb up the career ladder, but just understanding themselves and how they progress. Would you recommend that?
I absolutely recommend it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a coach. It could be a mentor. And I think it's really important. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I do mentor quite a few women, because it's very important for us to be able to guide people, not just in their career journeys, even sometimes in their personal journeys, right? And the sooner you can get people who can have very honest conversations with you, the better it is for you in terms of, how you're choosing to sort of live your life from a career point of view, or even personal. I mentioned earlier that my coach said to me, have you ever considered being a CEO? I had never thought about it. I was very happy to remain in marketing for years and years and years. I didn't see the potential of being a CEO in myself, okay? But I had this coach who was able to have that conversation with me, and all of a sudden I was like, wow, actually, yes, I can do that. So I think mentoring is hugely important. I have quite a few. I have a board of directors. Let's call it that. People from different industries, who can really sort of say, Uche, you sound crazy. Stop that. And not afraid to sort of give me that feedback and still give me really great advice. So I really implore people to do that. I'm really passionate about mentoring. So I really implore women. And by the way, one last thing I want to add about mentoring. Because a lot of times we see it as, this sort of like, oh, she's a CEO and she could be my mentor. I'm just starting out. Actually, even if you're just starting out in your career, you could be a mentor to someone in school, because they're looking at you like, you know, she works here. How did she get this job? How did she get to this point? You know, so mentoring can start at any point in time. You could be a mentor to anyone, and I hope that more women take that on.
Thank you. Great advice. Right, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the session. I know there were a number of questions unanswered. What we will do is get them to the panelists, so hopefully we can provide some feedback on the website. I'm going to hand over to Jess, who's going to wrap up the session.
Thank you all very much. I think this has been the most incredible session. So thank you, Uche, Judith, Val, and Nikki for just taking the time out of your very busy diaries to you know, be open and share some, I think, very inspiring stories and advice. And thank you to everyone else who's taken the time to join us today. We hope that you have also found it to be a useful session. So I hope everyone has a good rest of their days wherever you are. Please do go onto the WTF website if you want to access this recording, which will go online. And there you can also find other recordings for past virtual masterclasses. And please, you know, take care, stay safe, and look forward to seeing you all at the next event. And do pass on the word. Thank you, everyone. Take care.